Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
So over the weekend, President Trump declared that Iran's nuclear capabilities were completely and totally obliterated by the American airstrikes. The full extent of the damage, which is being assessed by U.S. intelligence agencies, is still unclear. Several disclosures and claims by the United States and United Nations officials, along with satellite images taken after the Israeli and American airstrikes, have shed some light on the situation in Iran, in particular at its major nuclear sites. A leaked U.S. intelligence report said that attacks set back Iran's nuclear program by only a few months. That's a finding that's been disputed by the White House and in particular by President Trump. Both the New York Times and CNN reported the same over the last week, much to the chagrin of Trump personally. That preliminary classified report said that the American bombing of the 3 nuclear sites in Iran set back that country's nuclear program only by a few months. The report was put together by the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, in which it is estimated that the Iranian nuclear program had been delayed by less than 6 months because of these strikes. Trump, of course, disputes that claim made by his own intel folks. Instead, he's lashed out at the media.
What intelligence do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
She's wrong.
The CIA Director John Ratcliffe said last week that the strikes had severely damaged Iran's nuclear program, although he did not exactly outline what he means by severely damaged. Rafael Grossi, who is the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, has said that the centrifuges at the deeply buried Fordo enrichment site are no longer operational. But he also added a word of caution. He said it would be too much to assert that Iran's nuclear program has been totally wiped out. Iran built the Fordo fuel enrichment plant deep inside a mountain. It is impervious to any attack except the one that we saw last Sunday, which was a repeated assault by American bunker buster bombs. In fact, an American official has confirmed that at least 6 B-2 bombers, which flew all the way from Missouri in the U.S., flew 37 hours and then ended up dropping about a dozen 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs on Fordo last Sunday. The Fordo site contained thousands of Iran's most advanced centrifuges, which are meant to enrich uranium. These enriched uranium centrifuges are the ones that are critical to making a nuclear weapon. In 2023, the IAEA had back then estimated that it had discovered uranium which had been enriched to more than 80% purity at the Fordo enrichment plant, just under the 90% that is required to make a nuclear weapon. Satellite images which were captured shortly after the American airstrikes reveal significant damage as well as the likely entry points for these bunker buster bombs. The images show distinct changes in the appearance of the ground. Also, you can see significant gray dust near the possible strike locations. The bunker busters have to penetrate the earth and they will only explode after traveling several hundred feet inside the ground. The UN nuclear watchdog has said that given the power of these bombs, 30,000 pounds is what they weigh, that were dropped on Fordo, the assessment by the IAEA is that these centrifuges may no longer be operational. The spinning centrifuges, that's the mechanism of these high-speed centrifuges which are required to make a nuclear weapon or to enrich uranium to the level required to make a nuclear weapon. That spinning mechanism requires a high degree of precision. These are vulnerable to intense vibrations. So if you have a 30,000 pound that's dropped deep inside, several hundred feet inside the earth, and then that leads to an explosion, it's likely that it would have affected the spinning centrifuge. Natanz, which is the site of Iran's largest uranium enrichment program, that was damaged by multiple Israeli strikes, along with an American attack that appears to have targeted the underground enrichment halls of Natanz. The IAEA says that it had identified direct impacts on the underground enrichment halls at Natanz after Israel targeted the facility with missiles first. It also said that the attack had destroyed the overground part of the fuel enrichment plant. Unlike in Fordo, in Natanz, the facilities are buried just a few meters deep. Satellite images show that 2 craters were seen over the suspected locations of those facilities. A US Navy submarine fired more than 24 cruise missiles at a third site, which is called Isfahan, which had also been attacked by the Israeli military. That site was thought to house the enriched uranium along with facilities that are meant to process uranium ore and then turn uranium gas into a solid form. Only after it reaches solid form can it be potentially made into a weapon. But how much has Iran's program actually been set back by? And can Iran still build a nuclear weapon despite these massive attacks by America and Israel? Iran has a long history of building covert underground nuclear sites. There are anywhere between a dozen to 24 sites across the length and the breadth of this country. This month, Iranian officials had claimed that the country had another enrichment site in a secure and previously undisclosed location. They claim it's not a location that is vulnerable like Fordo or Natanz. Experts believe that this new site could be close to Natanz. It's under the hills called the Ku'a Kolang Gazla. It's a mountain range nearly a mile above sea level. That means it could be buried twice as deep as Fordo. Senior American officials have also conceded that they do not know with certainty the fate of Iran's stockpile of the uranium. Before the American airstrikes, there was evidence that the Iranians who were tuned in to what President Trump had been repeatedly saying, these threats of attacking and taking military action against these nuclear sites, there is word that the Iranians had removed up to 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity from Isfahan. The Defense Intelligence Agency's report also said that much of Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was moved much before the strikes, which destroyed little of the nuclear material that had already been enriched. Iran may have moved some of that to secret locations, one of which may now be coming to light. Some Israeli officials also conceded that they believed that the Iranian government had maintained small covert enrichment facilities so that they could easily transfer the nuclear program in the event of an attack. It is not clear whether the Iranians will still try to rebuild the program, the nuclear program that is. The sad truth is that by striking Iran, the United States and Israel has made it much more likely that Iran will want to now obtain a nuclear weapon. Even if these strikes knocked out all of Iran's nuclear facilities, Iran will now be much more motivated than ever before, perhaps, to rebuild its nuclear capacities and pursue not just uranium enrichment, but actual weapons grade so that it can make a nuclear weapon. The future of Iran's nuclear program will depend on a multiplicity of factors. 1, the extent of the damage left behind. 2, how many of Iran's secret nuclear sites are still functional, are still active. And 3, Tehran's negotiating position in the coming days. But one thing is as clear as daylight, that just like in the case of Ukraine, had Iran possessed a nuclear weapon already before these attacks by America and Israel, the nature and magnitude of the American and Israeli action would have been much more restrained. And to that extent, nuclear weapon still remains not just the great deterrent, but also the great equalizer.